Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. This is Perpetuality. This may very well be my second last video until the holiday season, but what a year it's been. I've got the Seiko Alpinist Sunbeam on the left and the Seiko SNE569 Solar on the right. Now, Seiko seems to be on fire, releasing watch after watch that seems to be derivative and limited run, but very much the same watch over and over again. These two stuck out to me. They're so different that they could be almost their own separate line of watches. I'll get into the reasons why, but here are some of the specifications. Now, the Seiko Alpinist Sunbeam is your familiar alpinist that you've known to come and love. But what's new and a little bit unfamiliar to me is this SNE569 Solar sub, I'd like to say. And I'm not a big fan of solar quartz dive watches. It's just not what I gravitate to right away. But I do have to say that my thoughts and my mind has been changed after spending 2 weeks with this piece. Let's get into the full in-depth review, hopefully leave it with some helpful information, and go from there. I find it disconcerting when a dive watch doesn't weigh anything at all on the wrist, as I'm used to automatic or mechanical movements in my dive watches, but the Seiko Solar Sub wears comfortably with that 38.5mm case. You can see it sitting centered completely on my wrist, and there is a good proportion of dial to bezel to bracelet on this watch. It really reminds me of vintage Submariners back in the day and how they fit in war. With that being said, the Alpinist is no slouch. It is only 0.1mm in lug-to-lug length, smaller than the SNE569, but the aggressive lugs that taper down into the wrist make this watch a lot more comfortable. 39mm is a little bit larger, of course, but you can tell that it sits pretty and comfortably on my 6¼ inch wrist. I do like the feel and look of this on a leather strap. I do want to say that as great as it is to review watches and bring you guys watch content, it would not be made possible without the help of sponsors. And I want to say a special thank you to Ryan at Bezel House for lending me his Seiko SNE569 for review. If you're interested in this watch, please check out the link in the description below. Now, Zhang He from Oblique had sent me this watch stand to check out, and I want to thank him for sponsoring this video as well. This is a great way to accessorize and also for you to display your watches. It is made out of aluminum, formed metal, and it is a very solid piece of kit. The packaging is what you get here, very simple, minimalistic, and immediately upon opening the package, I was taken back by the quality of the watch stand. The base is heavy aluminum, and the top part is sheepskin leather. This kind of mocha colored leather is a rather elegant color to see in combination with this space gray. The arm itself attaches to the base with 2 screws, and I do have confidence in the fact that it seems to attach very securely. There is an arm that you can adjust the angle to have your watches displayed in a certain way. I think this is a rather elegant way for you to show off your watch or to store your watch, especially if you have a bracelet that you just don't want to rub against the inner part of the bracelet, as it will scratch over time. If you're into displaying your watches this way, please give Oblique a look at in the link in the description below. And thank you, Zhang He. Let's dive right into the Solar SNE569, and what you're getting is a ghost edge bezel. We'll get into that in just a second. There is a sun ray dial, along with these typical pointed arrow hands. The overall feeling of the watch, right down to its weight, is actually not bad. Considering that it's a Solar sub, this watch actually weighs very similar to the Alpinist, believe it or not, despite being a millimeter smaller in diameter. Most of the case finishing is brushed. In fact, there are no polished surfaces whatsoever. I'm a big fan of that. The drilled lug holes accompany this case to assist you in switching out straps. There is a crown. The crown itself is robust, does actually lend over to its 200-meter water resistance. There is no Seiko signed logo on it, which might be a disappointment to some, but I think it works here. The coin edge bezel sits proudly on the case, and it makes up most of its thickness. The watch itself does not have solid end links, you're getting hollow end links. The bracelet is fairly robust, but you are getting this fold over stamped steel clasp. The saving grace, however, is you're getting 4 points of micro adjustments to center the clasp on your wrist, which is a welcome addition. Now, the diver extension on the opposite side is your standard Seiko fare. It's rather hard to remove. I won't even try to do it on camera here, it'll take me far too long. As you can see, as I open the clasp here, it's a double button mechanism that releases the clasp with stamped steel on the folding part, and I do feel like a lot of people have a bone of contention with this particular bracelet, saying that it doesn't add up to the rest of the watch. You are getting a Kanagawa wave on the back in standard Seiko fare, and the clasp itself, it works. It keeps the bracelet secured on the wrist, but I don't have much else to say about it. Seiko has mentioned that on a full charge, this watch should last you 10 months, and I'm rather impressed because there is no indication of a solar panel underneath that sunray dial. Most of the time with a solar powered watch, you do have a transparent dial to lend within that solar panel operation in order to power up the watch. You're not getting that here. It's an interesting look. Upon closer inspection, the bezel is made up of tiny concentric circles, finished off with a white triangle lume pip that's reminiscent of the SKX. The color is outstanding, but the operation of the bezel is even better. 120 clicks all the way through, and there are very minimal play in the bezel at all. It does remind me of the SKX in operation. Mine doesn't line up precisely here, that's a typical Seiko trait. However, I do love that color of that bezel. There's something to be said about the Seiko Alpinist being ubiquitous and having a cult following. It is true. Now, the gold tone variant, the Sunbeam version of this watch, is something that challenged my perceptions on what I would like to have as a collector. This green dial, it's almost forest green in a way, mimics the green that you would see in the forest at the edge of sunrise. It works well with this gold tone case. It is PVD coated in gold, but it has the appearance of bronze in certain light, and for some reason, it just works. Now, with that being said, the bezel action, I wish that there was detents or clicks to let you know that you're moving it, and I wish that it had locked in place with at least something like a screw down crown. It's far too easy to bump. I understand the utility of it as a compass bezel to get your bearings straight as to what's north, west, south, and east in the mountains. Getting back into the case design, it's probably one of the standout features of the watch. That curvaceous case design with that gentle sloping lug that's accompanied with this brushwork that seems to be very eye-catching and delicate on top, transitioning into this polished surface on the side of the case. The overall shape of the Alpinist has been one of my favorites. There is a screw-down crown to accompany with its 200-meter water resistance, and I really appreciate that. The overall feeling of the case and the wearability of the watch marks it quite high on my rank of list for field watches. Now, you do get this leather strap, and it is a calf range strap with this deployment buckle. It's actually flipped the other way around, with the short side on the lower part of the watch and the longer side on the upper part. And the way that the strap feels on the wrist is quality. This is far beyond what we've experienced in the past for Seiko leather straps. It feels quite good. You are getting the 6R35 movement on the back, standard 70-hour power reserve, 21,600 vibrations per hour, exhibition case back. It is a delightful movement and it's a good pairing for this watch. The overall feeling and the packaging of this watch with that deployment buckle, I do feel like it is a cut above the regular Alpinist, though this is not a limited edition in any capacity. Now, the only thing that I have to say, if you have a smaller wrist, you might get a lot of excess strap on the longer side of the strap on the wrist. It's hard to avoid, especially when you have it reversed on this watch. The fold-over mechanism is solid, and there are no complaints. It's been a delight to have this watch on its default strap for a couple of weeks. But I can see this being paired with some kind of leather strap that's more traditional, and it would work. It's under the macro lens that we reveal the true value of a watch, and for the SNE569, the indices sit on top of that beautiful sunray dial. They most likely are stamped onto the dial. I really can't find the facts and figures around that, There is a base metal that you can see at the date window that appears to be the solar panel, and speaking of the date wheel, it's sharp and it's centered perfectly within the window, which is always a happy mark of quality. Looking at the way that the seconds hand ticks around, revealing the printing, it's done exquisitely and very sharp. There's no spillage material, no foreign material that I can see on the dial, and I'm happy to report that the seconds hand hits every single mark perfectly. The Alpinist, on the other hand, is a different mantra around dial execution. The indices are stamped on top of that sunray green dial, with the Seiko logo also being stamped as well too. Looking at the date window in the Cyclops, I can see that it is aligned perfectly, just like the Solar SNE569. The way that the printing's been done on the compass bezel, however, is very, very good. Sharp, legible, and it has this shimmery effect to it. I will say that the printing and execution is good on the Alpinist, but I did find some flaws on one of the indices. It is there's a bit of a dent on one of them. The hand stack is tight, however. I hope that you've made it this far and realized this isn't to compare both of these watches, as they're not nearly comparable in the categories that they represent to each other. But the Sunbeam Alpinist is different. It is not a watch I gravitate to in any capacity, yet this is one of the Seiko releases out of the 200 different watches that they've released this year that just stuck out to me. It works, the color scheme, everything. And the same can be said for the SNE569. That ghost bezel with that sunray dial is such a brilliant match. If you're looking for something that's off the beaten path and is for a very, very well balanced size at 38.5 millimeters to 39 millimeters, these might be the perfect choice for you. And I think you can wear them as long as you have the capacity and the open mindset to try smaller to mid-sized watches. These will be a very welcome addition to your collection. Now, with that being said, which one would I choose out of both of these? I think visually the Alpinist is a little bit more interesting. I'm not a big fan of a quartz solar movement, but I just can't get away at how good that SNE569 looks. In typical Seiko fashion, the Lume Bright on their divers is phenomenal, and this one has immediate reaction to my UV blacklight. It seems to have good longevity too. Even amount of material applied all across the indices. I do wish that the indices are a little bit larger. If the lume plots were larger and more pronounced, it might lend for a very well-balanced look on the dial, but it kind of gives it a vintage appeal in a way. It really reminds me of a 14060 Submariner. It is a handsome dial, to say the least. Another thing I wish that it had was a loomed bezel, but I suppose at under $700 we really could not ask for too much. It has a blue hue to it, and I feel like in all execution it's been done well. Now, in stark contrast to the Solar Sub that we saw earlier, the Alpinist has lume all around the dial, but not on the indices. Rather, it has these circular plots. These Squelette cathedral hands are distinctive to one another from the hour to the minutes. You clearly can tell which is which in the darkness. Even the syringe-like seconds hand is unique to this watch. I do feel like I wish more of the dial is loomed up. I understand the execution is done this way due to the nature of the stamped indices. If you liked today's video, please consider subscribing, and like the video. Please comment if you have anything to say about these watches, and I will catch you in the next video, which will be the last for 2021. Thank you.